What do Super Tuscans and tigers have in common? I know that sounds ridiculous, but if you look at Tuscany the right way, it makes sense. Just stick with me here. If you're someone that would prefer to just go right to the bottles, check out the chapters in the description, you can go right to them. But for everyone else, let's get into it. In Tuscany, one grape is clearly dominant, Sangiovese. If you've had a red wine from Tuscany, it's very likely that you've had a Sangiovese already. At its core, Sangiovese is all about structure, and its home is Tuscany. The reason it works so well here comes down to the environment and centuries of practice. Tuscany has really warm, sunny days that help the grape ripen, but it also cools off at night. That temperature swing, or diurnal shift, helps preserve acidity in the grapes, even when they get really ripe. So the wines almost always have an opportunity to come out feeling fresh and balanced. Tuscany is one of the most iconic wine regions in the world. Rolling hills, cypress trees, stone villages, it's exactly what you picture in your mind when you think of classic Italian wine country. And it's home to some of the most iconic wine names out there. Chianti, Brunello, Vino Nobile, and eventually the wines that would become Super Tuscans. But instead of just thinking about these as different wines, let's think about Tuscany and Sangiovese as a common feline ancestor. One origin, one family, and over time, that lineage branches out into some very different cats. Let's start with the one most people know, Chianti, or more specifically, Chianti Classico. If Tuscan Sangiovese is that shared ancestor, then Chianti Classico is the house cat. Familiar, easy to find, yet unmistakably still part of that family. For a lot of people, Chianti is the first real reference point that you have for Tuscan wines. Chianti as a whole is actually a pretty large area, broken up into a lot of different subzones. But Chianti Classico is that original core, the historic heart of the region, sitting between Florence and Siena. Here is where it all started. The boundaries here were first defined back in the early 1700s, and while the overall Chianti area expanded later on, Chianti Classico stayed tied to that original zone. The vineyards here tend to sit at higher elevations than other areas within Chianti, and that keeps the wines a little fresher. So instead of really ripe, heavy fruit, you tend to wind up with wines that are a little bit brighter, more acidity, more lift, and a little bit more of that floral, spicy side of Sangiovese. From there, the family starts to change shape a little bit. Let's look at Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. If Chianti Classico is the house cat, then Vino Nobile is the leopard. It's still clearly part of the cat family, but it's more sleek, more controlled, and a little more deliberate in how it shows itself. It's built mostly from Sangiovese, only they use the local name Brunello Gentile. Like most regions in Europe, there are rules here. The wines have to be made of at least 70% Sangiovese, they have to be aged before release, and they have to see some time in oak. But stylistically, this is where things start to feel more composed, more refined, more controlled. Historically, these wines were associated with nobility. Back in the 1600s, some poet called it the wine of kings, and it's in records all the way up to people like Thomas Jefferson. Now, if Vino Nobile di Montepulciano was the leopard, then the lion of the Tuscan wine world is Brunello. Brunello di Montalcino is one of the most revered wines in Italy, maybe all of the world, and it's still just Sangiovese from Tuscany, only on a whole different level. Here, the local clone of Sangiovese is called Brunello, and the rules are much stricter. These wines have to be aged for years before they're released. That means 5 years from harvest, with time in barrel and in bottle. These wines are built to last. They're more structured, they're more concentrated, and they're designed to develop over time. Montalcino is one of the warmest and driest areas in Tuscany, which goes a long way to pushing the grapes toward ripeness and depth. This is Sangiovese at full strength, bigger, more commanding, and built to hold its ground. And for a long time, this is how Tuscany was understood. Built around tradition, the rules and regulations that govern each region, same grape, same family and lineage, just developing differently alongside one another. But eventually that stopped being enough. Because some producers looked at those rules and decided they didn't need them. One of the earliest and most important examples of these wines is Sassicaia. This was something completely different for Tuscany at the time. The wines were still built around Sangiovese, but were influenced by Bordeaux and used varietals like Cabernet and Cabernet Franc. And because of this, it didn't fit into the system that existed, and it was labeled a table wine. As more producers started experimenting with this new idea of blending outside varietals with Sangiovese, they ran into the same roadblock. These were serious wines that didn't fit into Tuscany's neat little box, but their quality was undeniable. That's where the term Super Tuscan comes from. It's not an official classification, it has no legal definition. It's a name that got attached to wines that felt like they didn't need the rules, and proved that they didn't. Now, if Chianti Classico, Vino Nobile, and Brunello are all cats that abide by the same rules as all the other cats, then Super Tuscans are the tiger. Solitary, independent, strong, and not bound by the structure that the others follow. Super Tuscans don't rely on the system. They define themselves. So when you look at Tuscany this way, it's not just a region with a bunch of subzones. It's one grape that evolved differently in different places for different purposes. From the house cat, to the leopard, to the lion, to the tiger. If that's the family tree, let's look at some bottles that'll show you what cats taste like, I guess. First up, Caparzo Sangiovese. This is just straight Sangiovese from Tuscany, the feline ancestor of all those other bottles. Despite being a bottle that's like $10, it did get a 90-point score from James Suckling, and that's because it is a great expression of the grape and the region in one package. It's not crazy complex, but it does the job. Red fruit, pomegranate, blood orange, and a little bit of spice on the finish. It's a medium-bodied wine, and it's pretty juicy. This is exactly what you want as a starting point. Bright, lifted, and easy to understand. But now let's get into the progeny. Chianti Classico, specifically a bottle from Felsina. This vintage of Felsina Chianti Classico got great critic support. We're talking about a 92 from Suckling, a 92 from Karen O'Keefe, and a 91 from Venice. Tasting-wise, you're looking at red berries, cherries, dried herbs, spice, and a touch of earth. This wine is medium-bodied with fine tannins. It is really balanced, and it is very food-friendly. Next, we'll look at Avignonesi Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. So these guys make their Vino Nobile 100% Sangiovese, even though they don't have to. And this is a bottle that really shows off the polish that you should expect from a Vino Nobile di Montepulciano. This wine has notes of red berries, cherry, surprise, surprise, violet, plum, and a touch of licorice. The texture is really the key here. It is extremely refined. Now, we'll look at Uccelleria Brunello di Montalcino. You got big scores here. 94 plus from Venice, a 94 from Wine Advocate, and a 93 from James Suckling. There's a bit of a balsamic note here, alongside black cherry, plum, herbs, spice, cocoa, and earth. This is fuller bodied, deeper, and more concentrated. The tannins are definitely there, but at this point in the 2017 vintage's life, they are really well integrated. And then we come to the Super Tuscans, specifically Antinori Tigonello. This is one of those tigers, a bottle that doesn't need the rules. This wine is still mostly Sangiovese, but the rest of it is backed up by outside varietals, Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc. Now the 2022 got huge scores, a 96 from Suckling, a 95 from Venice, and a 94 from Spectator. You get black cherry, plum, bramble, violet, graphite, mint, leather, and spice. Much more complex with a lot of flavors that you can't get without the addition of those two Bordeaux varietals. So now, when you look at a shelf full of Tuscan wines, you're not just looking at labels with words on them, you're seeing different families within the same ancestral tree. A lot of these will have a lot in common, but there are core factors to each that make them unique. If you want to check out any of the wines that I talked about in this video, I have a link down in the description. I'll also throw a link down there to just Tuscany in general so you can explore. Let me know, is it completely ridiculous to compare wine regions to animals? I don't think so. And don't forget to share this video with a friend if you enjoyed it, because wine is always much more enjoyable when you're sharing it with someone else. Like and subscribe if you like this kind of content, because it's what I do. It's gonna be it for me this week. Adios.